This video is brought to you by Artistworks. Artistworks are part of TrueFire Studios, and they offer direct access to master musicians through their innovative online learning platform. Partnering with iconic musicians, they've crafted decades of industry experience into guided paths of online lessons. Crucially, there's an option to get personal feedback tailored specific to your playing via their unique video exchange. Get direct guidance towards your playing goals. You can use the code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of Artistworks courses. I finally grew up and put together a pedal board that hopefully will stay together for more than 3 minutes. So the idea of this video was that I think maybe last week or something like that, I did a video talking about trying to, go back and experience using a tube amp live. So there's a whole video on this if you want to check that out. But basically what's going on is I've got an Angry driver here. So this is the JHS Angry driver. Basically it's a Boss Blues driver as well as an Angry Charlie. I'm only really using the Angry Charlie because that does like a Marshall in a box type thing, really good for rhythm tones and without too much of like a mid boost, like a tube scream, whatever. Big chunky tones, that's what you were hearing in the intro anyway, was this pedal board. Then a Keeley Tone workstation for the reason that I've got a compressor, a drive and a boost and another drive. So there's a tube screamer, a blues breaker or katana, and then a compressor. The reason that I've got this actually after the Angry driver is because essentially I use that to sort of balance between the drive and clean tones so that when I turn off the drive I don't have a boost up in volume, sort of helping out some gain staging stuff, and I'm gonna guess it's gonna help kind of with pickups as well. So if I put in some humbucker pickups, it's gonna sort of balance that out. I've tweaked this for single coils at the moment. Then instead of the HX Stomp XL, which I've gigged for the last sort of year, maybe 2, I can't remember exactly, because I'm now using these analog gain stages up front, partly because I want a bit more versatility and partly because I think these sound really good in front of an actual amp. The HX Stomp is handling delay, so it handles like a dotted delay and then just a normal delay, which is a bit further back for kind of solos or maybe clean parts. Or just general sort of ambience, that you might want to put on to a lead rhythm part, that sort of stuff. Basically what happens in here is that I have the delays going into a reverb and then it splits off, and out of this send, that goes to the front of my amp. After the split, basically what happens is there's a Grammatico, which is a Dumble clone style amp, set clean, going into an EQ and a cab, and then that goes out to the front of house. So for that reason I don't have to mic up my tube amp because basically this does sort of the job of something like a load box in some sort of way. This for me was the best way that I could make use of the work that I've already done to tweak the delays that I use live, but also reduce the amount of microphones that are live on stage. I think we're playing with a sax player on Saturday, so you know, the less microphones you actually have on stage, the better in terms of reducing feedback, and you know, it's a thing. Right, so that's the pedal board. Actually, what I'm using on this side is the Harley Benton Power Plant ISO 2 Pro. Super cheap, functional. The cool thing about it, it has two 500 milliamp outputs that can be switched between 9, 12 and 18. So I could run like the Van Wilden Royal Overdrive off of that if I wanted to, or an Eventide H90, which I've got to do a video on at some point. But yeah, the actual pedal board that I'm using is the D'Addario Expand, because essentially I could just take this off and then swish it back down if I wanted to. HX Stomp, most of the delays that we use these days, personally, or I do, are digital anyway, so I might as well be in the box for delays and reverb. I think they're the ones that I'm used to using. Somewhat further downstream, so this is kind of handling the amp part of things, a nice lightweight kind of 20 watt-ish head. It's a clone of a Matchless Lightning made by guys Rift Amps in the UK. Apparently, although Keith, you might disagree with this, is based somewhat on the top boost channel of a Vox, and has 6v6s in the power. And I'm using this just clean. So I also just tried plugging this board into the front of the Line 6 Catalyst, and that worked too. So there's options that I've got around this, so that's a cool thing. But I wanted to try, you know, gigging tube amps for a bit as well. I'm not going fully away from the modelling stuff. If I've got some amps, I want to get used to trying to use them live, see if I'm missing out on anything and all that stuff. The cab that I use is a Mesa Boogie open back with an EV12 speaker in it. All of this is fairly lightweight stuff, except for that speaker, which is 9 kilos, but since it's in a 1x12 open back cab, it's not particularly heavy. Okay, and some folks asked about what the actual kind of PA rig that I use is in the band. It's a function band, 5-piece. There's a singist, a drummist, a bassist, a keyboard player, and then last of all me. I play guitar and try to do sound. There is, so the desk that I use is a Behringer X18, like a digital desk. I do have some worries about one day it just blowing up and not working, but I just connect the laptop to that and it kind of does its thing. Then the front of house, I used two Yamaha DXR 15s. Now, I used 15s because I don't have space in the car to carry a sub, so I wanted something that could really kick out and handle enough bass that when you're playing in a marquee or something like that, you can kind of fill the space. But most of the time, the kind of gigs that I'm doing, like wedding stuff, I tend to be playing in sort of big, boomy wedding venues with like loads of reflections. So in most cases, you're not turning up super loud anyway, and a sub in those situations probably wouldn't help anyway. So sub has been something that I can just replace by having two kind of pretty powerful out front of house with big bass response. So DXR 15s, those have been really good. For on-stage monitoring, a lot of the band are using in-ears. I personally don't, because I want to be able to go outside, out front of house, and check what things are sounding like. For the singist and for me, there are Flexis, I think they're 8-inch speakers, DB Audio or DB Technologies Flexis 8-inch. They're really quite small. I bought them from someone who I think had used them initially with like a fractal setup. They're small and quite directional, but quite loud as well. Do the job. So that's, I think, most of the live rig, right? So we've got the front of house doing that. The desk is the Behringer, and then Flexis for the bits, the bottom bits. And those all go in the car. And that, I think, is basically the live rig. I think that's what it's going to be. There's chunks of this that I may chop and change around. As I guess, let me know if you've been someone who chops and changes around to keep things interesting as well. Our set list doesn't change that much, so you know, changing guitars for gigs and stuff like that is just a way to keep it like a little bit fresh. sometimes, and just to get to know the gear a bit better, because most of the set list I kind of know like the back of my Skoda. So that's the live rig, I think. So I hope that answered some of the questions that some of you folks may have had. I guess the heart of it is this, which is neat for me, but actually is probably not actually that neat. But it'd be interesting to see how long I can stay wedded to this as an idea. I have absolutely been consistent with the HX Stomp XL and the Henriksen Bud for over a year now, so I wanted to, you know, try some other things. And this hybrid board is a little bit more flexible in that I could, you know, switch in the amp or switch out the amp and whatever. I think for the type of gig that I'm doing, a lower output amp is probably the name of the game, probably. And I'm getting the drive from the pedal board, yeah, and then the HX Stomp dealing with the front of house stuff. Let me know your thoughts. Is that complicated? Is that simple? To me, it's way more simple than trying to go down a 4-cable method route, which is another option. But this also works because if I could go into any amp that will set clean, I don't have to worry about amps having an effects loop, that sort of stuff. So fairly versatile, fairly foolproof, I think. If the amp goes down, I can just go straight into the HX Stomp out of the front of house. If the amp goes down, front of house isn't even going to notice. So I think it's fairly okay as an idea. Let me know anything you change about that, and let me know your thoughts. Cheers.